I still remember the day my parents called me dumb. It wasn't even a fight. It wasn't some heated argument or big dramatic scene. It was just casual, like they were stating a fact. We were sitting at the dinner table. Mum had made her usual Sunday pot roast, and Dad was going on about how proud he was of my sister Lauren. She had just been promoted again, some executive thing at a tech firm in Chicago. I was cutting my roast into small pieces, trying not to make any noise with the fork. Mom looked over at me and said, "Sweetheart, not everyone's meant to be smart like Lauren. Some people have other talents." Dad chuckled, barely looking up from his plate. "Yeah, not everyone can be the sharp one." They both laughed. I smiled too, but something inside me went cold. It wasn't the first time they said things like that. My whole life, I'd been the other daughter, the one who barely passed algebra, who didn't go to college, who worked at a local coffee shop. While Lauren's face was on the company website, I was used to it. But that night, something shifted. Maybe it was the way Lauren didn't even look at me, just sipped her wine with that half smirk she always had when our parents praised her. Or maybe it was how Mom later hugged me at the door and whispered, "Don't feel bad, honey. You've got a good heart. That's what matters, a good heart." The universal consolation prize. I drove home in silence. The night air felt heavy, like it knew something I didn't. My apartment was quiet. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint city noise outside. I stared at the envelope sitting on my kitchen counter. The one from the family lawyer that had arrived that morning. "Estate planning review," it said. I hadn't opened it yet. I thought about Mom's words again. Some people have other talents. Maybe she was right. Maybe mine wasn't being smart. Maybe it was just surviving them. The next morning, I went to work at the coffee shop, like nothing had happened. It was a small place in Seattle, tucked between a yoga studio and a flower shop. I'd been there for 5 years, and I liked it. It was simple, predictable. No one called me dumb there. People smiled when I handed them their latte. I knew all the regulars. The old man who read the Times cover to cover. The student who always forgot her wallet but promised to Venmo later. Lauren, of course, never came. She was too busy managing people who managed other people. That afternoon, I finally opened the envelope. It was from my parents' attorney, Mr. Burke, who'd handled their finances since forever. The letter said they were updating their estate plan and requested both daughters to come by next Friday to review the terms. All final decisions regarding family inheritance will be disclosed during the meeting. I folded the letter back up and just sat there for a long time. I already knew what it meant. They were going to give everything to Lauren. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about what it stood for, their approval, their pride, the acknowledgement I'd spent my whole life chasing. But the truth was, they'd already decided who mattered more a long time ago. Friday came. Their house was as perfect as ever. White brick, trimmed hedges, the same smell of lavender candles and fresh polish. Lauren arrived late, of course, in a white BMW, wearing a navy dress that probably cost my entire month's rent. We all sat in the living room while Mr. Burke read the terms. My parents' combined assets totaled over $13 million. Real estate, stocks, retirement accounts, and then the part that made my throat go dry. The estate will be inherited in full by Ms. Lauren Miller. A separate small fund will be set aside for Ms. Emily Miller in the amount of, he paused, looked at my parents. My mother gave a faint nod. $5,000, $5,000. I didn't look at them. I couldn't. My palms were sweating, my ears ringing. Lauren didn't even try to hide her smug little smile. After the meeting, Mom pulled me aside. "Emily, please don't take this the wrong way," she said. "Lauren's more equipped to handle large sums. You've never been good with the responsibility." I almost laughed. I wanted to say 100 things, but all I managed was, "Yeah, I know." When I got home that night, I sat in the dark for a long time. I thought about all the years I'd tried to make them proud. The late nights studying, the endless part-time jobs, the polite smiles at family dinners. For what? To be the family idiot with a $5,000 pity check. That's when I saw the other envelope. It was smaller, handwritten, tucked at the bottom of the lawyer's folder. My name on it. Just mine. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 2 lines written in my father's handwriting. If you're reading this, it means you're not as dumb as we thought. And below it, an address. No explanation. No signature. Just an address in Montana. I sat there staring at it, my heart pounding. For the first time in my life, my parents had given me a mystery instead of a lecture. And something inside me told me that whatever waited at that address was meant for me alone. And maybe, just maybe, that one envelope would change everything. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there at my kitchen table, staring at that piece of paper with the Montana address written on it. My dad's handwriting was so familiar, sharp and deliberate, the kind that belonged to someone who measured every word before writing it. But that note, it didn't sound like him. If you're reading this, it means you're not as dumb as we thought. What was that supposed to mean? A joke? Some kind of test? Or maybe one last jab before they officially erased me from their lives? By morning, I'd made up my mind. I was going to Montana. I called in sick at the coffee shop, packed a small duffel bag, and got in my old blue Subaru. It wasn't exactly built for long drives, but neither was I built for being humiliated. The GPS said it would take about 12 hours from Seattle to the small town listed on the envelope. Red Valley, Montana. Population 2,100. I'd never heard of it. The first few hours of the drive were quiet. I had too much time to think. About my parents, about Lauren, about how everything always came so easily to her. She never had to try. People liked her. Teachers, bosses, neighbors, everyone. She was the golden child. I was the nice one. Nice doesn't get you anywhere. By late afternoon, the landscape had changed. The pine trees were thicker, the air colder. The road narrowed into a 2-lane stretch that looked like it hadn't seen maintenance in years. Then finally, a faded wooden sign came into view. Welcome to Red Valley. It didn't look like much. A diner, a gas station, a few houses spread out across open land. The kind of place where everyone probably knew each other's middle name. I stopped at the diner for coffee, just to ask around. The waitress was an older woman with silver hair tied up in a bun. Her name tag said Martha. "Excuse me," I said, sliding the paper across the counter. "Do you know this address?" She squinted at it. "That's out past the river. Old Miller property, isn't it?" "Miller?" I blinked. She nodded. "Yeah. Belonged to some guy from out of state. Haven't seen anyone out there in years." "Why?" I hesitated. "He was my father." Her expression softened. "Oh, honey, then you've got yourself quite a drive up that dirt road. Be careful. Weather's turning bad tonight." I thanked her, paid for my coffee, and headed out. The road turned into gravel, then dirt, winding through the woods, until the trees opened into a clearing. And there it was. An old cabin, not fancy, but solid. Wooden porch, green shutters, and a small mailbox leaning sideways, half buried in snow. I parked, heart pounding. The place looked abandoned, but not forgotten. The front door was locked, so I circled around and found a spare key under a loose board near the steps. Typical Dad. Inside, the air was thick with dust, but everything was neat. A table, 2 chairs, a shelf full of books, and a small fireplace with logs stacked beside it. On the table, there was a metal box, locked. I tried the same key from the porch. No luck. I sat down, breathing hard. What was this? Some weird game? A cruel joke to keep me chasing after scraps of attention, even after they'd cut me out of everything? But then I noticed something taped under the table. Another envelope. Inside was a small note in my dad's handwriting again. If you want to know why we did what we did, find the key. You'll know where to look. I looked around the cabin. The shelf, the drawers, the floorboards. Nothing. Then my eyes landed on a picture frame above the fireplace. It was an old photo of me and Lauren as kids. I was maybe 10, she 12. We were sitting on a swing, both smiling, but I could still remember that day vividly. She'd pushed me too hard, and I'd fallen. Mom had run to her first. I took the frame down. The back felt heavier than it should. I pried it open, and there it was. A small silver key taped behind the photo. My hands were shaking as I unlocked the metal box. Inside, there were stacks of papers, an old USB drive, and a folded letter. I opened it carefully. Emily, if you're reading this, then you're the only one who followed through. I left this cabin and its contents in your name. There's more money here than you think, and it's all legally yours. But it's not just money, it's the truth. About Lauren. About everything. I froze. Don't trust anyone. Not even your mother. My breath caught in my throat. At the bottom of the box, under the papers, was a manila envelope labeled Confidential, Burke and Associates, the same law firm that had handled our inheritance. I slid it open and pulled out a set of documents. The first page was a financial record. Transfers, accounts, offshore holdings, millions of dollars. But not in my parents' names. They were in Lauren's name. And the earliest transfers started 5 years before my father's supposed retirement. It hit me like a punch. Lauren hadn't earned her money. She'd been taking it, and my parents knew. I sat there in stunned silence, the paper trembling in my hands. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel dumb. I felt dangerous. The wind howled outside, rattling the cabin windows. I tucked the papers back inside the box and locked it again. Whatever was happening, this was bigger than just favoritism. This was fraud, betrayal, and something my father had tried to tell me in the only way he knew how, by testing, if I'd be smart enough to find it. I looked out into the dark woods and whispered to myself, "All right, Dad, let's see how dumb I really am." I didn't leave the cabin that night. The snow had started falling hard, thick flakes swirling like dust in a snow globe. I sat by the fire, the box open in front of me, the papers spread across the table. My coffee had gone cold hours ago, but I didn't care. Lauren had been stealing from our parents. Not just stealing, orchestrating it. The records showed years of wire transfers from my parents' accounts into shell companies she'd quietly created. The company names all sounded legitimate. Blue Harbor Investments, Pacific Equity Holdings. But the listed owner was the same every time. Lauren Miller, Dad had known. He must have. And instead of confronting her outright, he left me this trail, as if he was hoping I'd finally prove I wasn't the dumb one. I stayed up till sunrise reading everything. There were copies of emails between Lauren and someone named Robert T. Hughes, who I figured was a lawyer or financial partner. The language was slick. Restructuring assets, preemptive inheritance planning, offshore diversification. But it all meant one thing. She'd stolen at least half of my parents' wealth, long before their so-called estate review. And they had still given her everything. By morning, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to run to them or confront her yet. I was going to play the game, quietly, carefully. I started with the USB drive. It was old and scratched, but it worked when I plugged it into my laptop. Inside were dozens of files, PDFs, images, spreadsheets, and one video folder labeled simply Proof. My heart raced as I clicked it. The first video was from a hidden camera. The angle looked like it came from an office, Dad's office. The timestamp was from 2 years ago. Dad was sitting at his desk, looking tired. The door opened and Lauren walked in, all confidence and charm, the way she always was when she wanted something. The audio was faint, but clear enough. "Dad, you said the transfer was temporary," she said, voice tight. "You can't just pull it back." "You said it was for investment, Lauren," he replied. "Not to hide money from your own family. It's my money too," she snapped. "You'd rather give it to Emily. She doesn't even understand half of what we do." Dad leaned back, exhaling. "Emily may not be as sharp as you think you are, but she's honest. That's something you'll never understand." There was silence. Then the sound of a chair scraping. Lauren's voice turned cold. "Then maybe you should stop trusting people who don't deserve it." The clip ended there. I sat frozen. My father hadn't just found out. He'd recorded it. And maybe that's why he'd built this little insurance box. The second video was shorter. Same office. Different day. Dad talking to someone off camera. "If anything happens to me, Emily will know where to look." That's when I knew. My father had never truly given up on me. He'd just stopped showing it. I leaned back, staring at the screen, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Confidence. By noon, the snow had cleared enough for me to drive into town. I found a small public library and used one of their computers to research Robert T. Hughes. It took less than 10 minutes to find him. Senior partner at Burke & Associates, the same firm handling our inheritance. Of course, the betrayal ran even deeper than I'd thought. I printed out a few documents, grabbed a cheap burner phone from a gas station, and drove back to the cabin. The plan forming in my head was risky, but it felt right. I wasn't going to fight them openly. I'd let them expose themselves. That night, I called Lauren. It was the first time we'd spoken since the inheritance meeting. She answered on the second ring, her voice as smooth as always. "Emily, didn't think I'd hear from you. I just wanted to say congratulations," I said, keeping my tone light. "You really earned that inheritance." There was a pause. "Thank you," she said cautiously. "That's surprisingly mature of you." "Yeah, well, I've been doing some thinking. I think Dad was right. Maybe I wasn't ready before. But I've been learning." Her silence lasted a second too long. "Learning what exactly?" "Oh, you know," I said, smiling even though she couldn't see it. "About investments, offshore accounts, corporate filings, boring stuff." Now she laughed. "Emily, don't tell me you're falling for one of those online scams again." "No," I said softly. "This time, I think the scam's a lot closer to home." She went quiet. For the first time in my life, I had the upper hand. I hung up before she could answer. After that call, I sent an anonymous email to Mr. Burke with a single sentence. "The files your firm helped conceal are now backed up in multiple locations. Choose wisely." I didn't know what scared him more, the content or the fact that I knew. By midnight, I was sitting by the fire again, watching the flames flicker against the walls. I thought about my dad, how much he must have struggled, torn between his daughters, and how my mum, the one person who always played innocent, had probably known the whole time. That's when I heard it. A car engine outside. Then, headlights cutting through the window. Someone was here. I grabbed the metal box, shoved it into my duffel, and killed the lights. My pulse was thundering in my ears. I peeked through the curtain. It was a black SUV, the kind you only see in government parking lots or movies. The engine cut off, and 2 doors opened. A voice carried through the wind. Low, male, sharp. "She's here. Check the cabin." I didn't wait to find out who they were. I slipped out the back door, boots crunching against the frozen ground, and ran toward the woods. The cold air burned my lungs, but I didn't stop. I didn't even look back. Whoever they weren't random. They were looking for the same thing I had found. The box. The proof. The truth my father had left behind. And now they knew I had it. As I reached the tree line, I turned once more toward the faint outline of the cabin. "Guess I really wasn't that dumb after all," I whispered. Then I disappeared into the dark. I ran until my legs gave out. My lungs burned, My hands were numb, and every breath felt like knives in my chest. The woods were pitch black, except for the faint glow of the moon breaking through the trees. I stopped behind a fallen log, crouched low, trying to quiet my breathing. The SUV's headlights swept across the cabin one last time before going dark. Then I heard footsteps crunching in the snow. 2 voices, men. One of them spoke into a radio. "She's gone. Tracks head north." My heart stopped. They had flashlights now, beams cutting through the trees. I stayed perfectly still, forcing myself not to move, even as snow melted against my face. When they got too close, I threw a rock in the opposite direction. The sound echoed, and one of them cursed, turning toward it. That was my chance. I crawled through the snow, staying low until I reached the edge of the road. My Subaru was parked about a quarter mile down, half hidden by trees. I sprinted the rest of the way, jumped in, and floored it. The tires slipped on the ice, but somehow the car caught traction. I didn't look back until I hit the highway. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. Who the hell were they? I drove for hours, not stopping until I crossed into Idaho. I found a cheap roadside motel off the interstate. Flickering neon sign, cracked parking lot. The kind of place where no one asks questions. The woman at the counter didn't even look up when I paid cash for a room. Inside, I locked the door, drew the curtains, and finally let myself breathe. My jeans were soaked, my hair matted, and my heart still racing like it was trying to escape my chest. The metal box sat on the bed beside me, cold and heavy. I wiped it off with a towel and opened it again. Everything was still there. The papers, the USB, the letter. Proof of everything Lauren and that lawyer had done. Proof my parents had looked the other way. For the first time, I realized something terrifying. If Lauren had people looking for me, that meant she already knew I'd found the cabin. I needed help. Someone who could understand what these documents meant. I thought about going to the police, but then I remembered Burke and Associates, the same firm that handled my parents' estate. If they were helping Lauren hide millions, they had people everywhere. Cops, judges, maybe even the media. So I did something stupid, or maybe it was smart. I called an old friend. His name was Ethan Carter. We'd gone to high school together. He was 2 years ahead of me. Smart, sarcastic, and the only person who'd ever defended me when people laughed about how slow I was. We hadn't talked in years, but I remembered hearing he worked in cybersecurity somewhere in Portland. When he picked up, his voice was groggy. "Emily, it's been, a decade?" "I need help," I said. There was silence. "You sound terrified. Where are you?" "Somewhere in Idaho. I can't explain everything on the phone. I just need to know if you can trace or decrypt files. Legally or not legally." He hesitated. "I can, but you're scaring me. What's going on?" "Can you meet me tomorrow? Somewhere public." "A diner maybe," he sighed. "Text me the location. And Emily, don't do anything stupid until I get there." I almost laughed. Too late. After hanging up, I spent the rest of the night reading through the financial statements again, this time looking for names. There were at least 6 accounts under Lauren's shell companies, most of them tied to offshore banks in the Cayman Islands and Belize. But one name appeared repeatedly across the transfers. Hughes Consulting, LLC, the same Hughes from the emails. It wasn't just Lauren. It was an entire operation. Embezzlement, tax evasion, fraud. And my father had been about to expose them before he died. Which made me wonder, was his death really an accident? The thought chilled me more than the cold outside. By dawn, I checked out of the motel and drove south. Every car behind me felt suspicious. Every truck's headlights in my mirror felt too close. I reached the diner around noon, a small roadside place with red booths and the smell of bacon and burnt coffee. Ethan was already there. He looked older, tired, but still had that same restless energy. He stood when he saw me, concern written all over his face. Jesus, Em. You look like you've been through hell. Close enough, I said, sliding into the booth. I placed the USB drive and a stack of papers in front of him. I need you to see what's on these files. He opened his laptop right there. You trust me with this? I don't trust anyone, but you're the closest thing I've got. He didn't say anything for a while, just plugged in the drive and started reading. His eyes moved fast. He was quiet for nearly 10 minutes. Then he leaned back, exhaling. Emily, this is huge. These are corporate transfers, hidden accounts. And this, he pointed at the folder labeled proof. This is blackmail material. Blackmail? He nodded. Your dad was gathering evidence against your sister and that lawyer. He was building a case. Whoever those men were last night, they weren't random. They were sent to clean up what he left behind. So what do? He looked at me, dead serious. You expose them, but not directly. You leak it smart. How? There are journalists who deal with this kind of thing. Whistleblower networks, secure uploads. If we can verify this evidence, we can bury your sister's empire and take down everyone helping her. I hesitated. And if she finds out I'm the one behind it, he gave a small grim smile. Then you'll have to make sure she's too busy running to look back. I stared out the window. The snow had stopped. The sky was clear now, pale and sharp, like the world was holding its breath. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for someone to save me. I was becoming the kind of person they should have never underestimated. I didn't go to the funeral, not because I didn't care, but because I couldn't. Standing over the people who broke me, pretending to cry. That wasn't something I could fake anymore. Instead, I sat in my car a few blocks away from the church, staring at the grey sky. My sister, Natalie, was probably inside, surrounded by mourners. She was always good at that. Being the center of attention, playing the grieving daughter, the golden child. I watched from a distance until the cars started leaving. My hands were shaking. I didn't know if it was anger, nerves, or the cold. Maybe all three. When the lawyer called me later that afternoon, his voice was calm and detached. Ms. Walker, your parents left behind a few documents and personal items for you. You can stop by tomorrow morning. Personal items. I laughed when I hung up. They probably meant some old photo frame, or maybe one of Mom's scarves. Something useless. But I still went. Not because I wanted anything, but because I needed closure. The law office was on the 10th floor of a downtown building. One of those quiet places that smells like paper and coffee. The receptionist looked up, polite but disinterested. You must be Ms. Walker. Mr. Harris is expecting you. I followed her into a small conference room. Mr. Harris, the lawyer, stood up to shake my hand. He was an older man, with silver hair and kind eyes. The kind of person who looked like he'd seen too many families tear themselves apart over money. Emily, I'm sorry for your loss, he began softly. Don't be, I said. They made their choices. He nodded, not judging. Then he reached into his briefcase and pulled out a large brown envelope. It had my name written on it in my father's handwriting. Emily Walker. I froze. My heart did something strange. A mix of hate and nostalgia. This was specifically left for you, he said, sliding it across the table. Your parents' estate has been mostly transferred to your sister. But this envelope, it came with instructions. I picked it up slowly. The paper was thick, expensive. My father had always liked expensive things. There's also a letter you might want to read privately, Mr. Harris added, placing a single folded note beside the envelope. I didn't open it there. I couldn't. I drove home in silence, the envelope sitting on the passenger seat like it was staring at me. I thought about tossing it out the window, letting the wind take it away. But curiosity, or maybe vengeance, kept me from doing that. When I finally opened it, I did it at the kitchen table. The same one I'd bought secondhand when I first moved into my apartment. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Inside the envelope, there was a letter, a key, and a bank document. The letter was short, just a few lines in my father's sharp, precise handwriting. Emily, I know you think we never saw your worth. You're wrong. You were the only one who never tried to impress us. The only one who worked for what she had. This key belongs to a safe deposit box at First Union Bank. What's inside is yours. No one else knows about it. Dad, I just stared at it. My throat was dry. I didn't know if I was supposed to cry or laugh. I drove straight to the bank. The manager took me to a private room, and when I opened the small metal box, I didn't know what to expect. Inside was a single black USB drive, a few old family photos, and another sealed envelope. My hands trembled as I opened the second envelope. It wasn't money. It was evidence, documents, bank statements, real estate records, hidden accounts, things I didn't understand at first. Until I saw Natalie's name. She'd been draining my parents' accounts for years, millions. While I was working double shifts, she was embezzling from her own family. My father knew. He'd known everything. And instead of confronting her, he'd gathered proof. Maybe he was planning to stop her. Maybe that's why the will was written the way it was. Maybe that's why he died so suddenly. I sat there for almost an hour, staring at the papers. My hands went numb. When I walked out of the bank, I wasn't the same person who'd walked in. For years, I'd been called the dumb one, the disappointment, the failure, but right then, I realized I was the only one left holding the truth. The next day, I made copies of everything. And then I called a journalist I knew from college. Someone who'd once told me, if you ever find something real, something big, call me. I was about to take my family's perfect reputation and tear it apart, piece by piece. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel stupid. I felt powerful. The sun hadn't even come up when I sat at my desk, staring at the spread of documents across it. Every page, every transaction, every signature, it all painted the same picture. My perfect sister had built her life on lies. I poured myself another cup of cold coffee and opened my laptop. The journalist, Sarah Green, had replied to my email just after midnight. Emily, if what you're saying is true, this is massive. Can you meet me tomorrow? Confidentially, Sarah was an investigative reporter for the Washington Herald. We'd gone to college together. She'd been ambitious, blunt, always chasing the truth. I hadn't spoken to her in years, but now she was the only person I trusted. I arrived at the coffee shop early, wearing a grey hoodie and sunglasses, even though it was still cloudy outside. Sarah came in 5 minutes later, her hair tied back, notebook in hand. She didn't waste time. Show me, she said. I handed her the folder. She flipped through it, page after page, her expression shifting from curiosity to disbelief. Jesus, Emily, she whispered. This isn't just theft. These are corporate accounts, offshore holdings, fraud on a serious scale. She was stealing from our parents, I said quietly, and from their company. They trusted her with everything. Sarah looked at me for a long moment. Do you want her in jail? I thought about it. The image of Natalie's smirk, her designer dresses, the way she used to talk about me like I was a stain on her perfect world. I thought about every holiday dinner where I was treated like an outsider in my own family. No, I said slowly. I want her to lose everything. Her reputation, her friends, her money, all of it. Sarah nodded. Then we'll do this right. For the next week, I worked with Sarah in secret. I gave her access to everything. Emails, ledgers, even video footage I'd found on my dad's old hard drive of Natalie forging signatures. Sarah's team verified every detail. She warned me that once the story went public, there would be no going back. I told her I was ready, but before the article went live, I wanted to see Natalie one last time. Her house looked like something out of a luxury magazine. White marble steps, glass doors, manicured lawns. When she opened the door and saw me, her smile was thin and cautious. "Well," she said, "look who finally decided to visit." I stepped inside without waiting for her to invite me. "Relax, I'm not here for money," she laughed. "Good, because there's none left for you." I turned to face her. "You're right. There's none left for anyone once you're done stealing it." Her smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone, opened a photo of one of the forged documents, and held it up. "You know exactly what I'm talking about." For a second, her face went pale. Then she smirked again. "You think you can prove anything? Dad's gone, Mom's gone. No one will believe you." "Oh, they will," I said. "Because by this time tomorrow, every news outlet in the country will have the full story." Her expression cracked. "You wouldn't dare." I looked around the perfect living room, the grand piano, the family photos on the wall. "I used to think I wasn't brave enough to fight you. Turns out I was just waiting for the right weapon." I turned and walked out, leaving her standing there, speechless. That night, Sarah published the article, "The Walker Family Scandal, $13 million fortune built on fraud and deceit." It spread like wildfire. News channels picked it up. Social media exploded. Natalie's company suspended her within hours. By morning, federal investigators were knocking at her door. I watched it all unfold from my small apartment. I didn't feel joy at first, just quiet disbelief. The world was finally seeing the truth I'd carried alone for so long. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. It was Natalie. Her voice was shaking. "You ruined me," she whispered. "No," I said. "You did that yourself." She started to cry. "You don't understand, Emily. I was trying to survive, to be what they wanted me to be. You were always the good one. They loved you more, even when they said they didn't." For a moment, I almost felt pity, but it faded fast. "Goodbye, Natalie," I said quietly, and hung up. The following week, my father's lawyer called again. Apparently, there was one last clause in the estate. Because of the fraud charges, Natalie's inheritance was frozen. The assets were to be transferred to the next legal heir. Me. I laughed when I heard it. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about finally being seen. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the dumb one. I felt like someone who'd finally learned how to fight back. Not with anger, but with truth. The same truth my father must have wanted me to find. It took weeks for everything to settle. The story had spread far beyond what I ever expected. Every major paper picked it up. Talk shows discussed it. People online debated whether Natalie was a victim of pressure or just pure greed. But I didn't join any of it. I stayed quiet. Some part of me wanted to disappear, to let the world focus on her, while I slipped back into my small, quiet life. But another part of me, one I didn't even recognize, wanted to breathe it all in. After years of being invisible, it felt strange to finally exist. I started waking up earlier. I'd sit by the window with coffee, watching the sun rise over the city skyline. For the first time in years, the silence didn't hurt. A few weeks later, I went back to my parents' house. It felt like walking into a museum of ghosts. Everything was clean and untouched, like the air itself hadn't moved since they died. I walked through each room slowly. My father's study, with his old books still lined up perfectly. My mother's favorite chair by the window. The place still smelled faintly of her perfume, lavender and vanilla. And then I stopped in front of the family portrait in the hallway. The three of us smiling stiffly, pretending to be happy. My father's hand rested on Natalie's shoulder. Mine was tucked awkwardly in front, like I wasn't sure if I belonged there. For the first time, I didn't feel the usual sting of resentment. I just felt free. In my father's study, I found another small box. Inside was a letter with my name written on it in his neat handwriting. "Emily, if you're reading this, it means the truth has found its way out. I never said it enough, but I was proud of you. Not for what you did, but for who you became despite everything. I left you more than money. I left you the chance to start over without the weight of our mistakes. Be kind to yourself. Dad! I sat there, staring at his words until the ink blurred through my tears. For years I'd wanted him to see me, to acknowledge me. And now somehow, he finally had. The inheritance came through a few days later. More money than I'd ever dreamed of. But I didn't splurge. I didn't buy a mansion or new car. I used part of it to pay off my debts and quietly donated the rest to a scholarship fund for girls who'd been told they weren't smart enough. Because I knew exactly how that felt. Months passed. Natalie went silent after her arrest. The last I heard, she'd taken a plea deal to avoid prison time. She sold her house, her cars, her jewelry, everything. One evening, I got a letter from her. No threats this time, just a single page. Emily, I hate you, but I also understand you. You were right. Maybe we both became what our parents made us, just in different ways. Take care of yourself. Natalie. I folded it up and placed it in the same box with my father's letters. Not out of forgiveness, but out of acceptance. A year later, I moved to a small coastal town in Maine. I rented a house near the ocean, the kind where you could hear the waves crash at night and smell salt in the air. I started writing, not for anyone else, but for me. Stories about people who'd been underestimated, broken, forgotten. Sometimes I'd get messages from people who'd read about my family scandal. They'd say things like, "You're so brave," or, "I wish I could do what you did." But I never felt brave. I just felt done. Done pretending. Done trying to earn love that was never freely given. One morning, while walking along the beach, I found a small seashell. Inside, there was a single drop of water glinting in the sun, like a tiny crystal. I don't know why, but I kept it. It reminded me of something my mother used to say before things went bad. Nothing stays hidden forever. Emily, the tide always brings the truth back. She was right. The tide had finally come in. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what it carried with it.